There are times when we notice something curious happening around us. Without raising your voice, without convincing, without insisting, someone changes. Not because he was pressured, but because something silent touched him, as if an invisible breeze had crossed the space between two hearts. Have you ever felt this? Nature never forces. The flower does not argue with winter to bloom ahead of time. The river doesn't push the stone away in anger. It simply passes by day after day until the stone shape changes. And yet, everything changes. There is a type of influence that is not born of control, but of presence. It doesn't come from effort. It comes from the inner state. We live in a world that believes that changing people requires strength, louder arguments, tougher rules, sharper opinions. But interestingly, the more we try to shape others, the more resistance we encountered, as if the human soul, feeling pushed, created even deeper roots in the place where you are. What if the path was different? And if transforming wasn't an act of pushing but to align, not a confrontation but a silent invitation? There is an ancient wisdom that observes life as a great flow. She understands that everything has its own rhythm, and that interfering too much breaks harmony. In this view, true change does not happen from the outside in, but from the inside out, and it often starts without words. When someone is at peace, that peace spreads. When someone is clean inside, the environment around them becomes lighter. When someone walks with integrity without needing to prove anything, others begin to question themselves, not out of obligation, but by resonance. This is how the most profound transformation happens. No emotional violence, no manipulation, no wear, just presence, constancy, and time. This video is not about convincing anyone. It's not about correcting, saving, or teaching. It's about how the simple act of being aligned with the invisible, it already changes everything it touches. Along this path, you will notice that there are subtle forms, almost imperceptible, to transform people, environments, and relationships, without ever forcing. If you feel, even vaguely, that there is something inside you wanting to live more harmoniously, with less friction and more truth, so remain here. Maybe you will discover that the greatest strength there is, it is precisely the one that does not try to dominate anything. There is a force that almost no one notices because it doesn't make any noise. She doesn't demand attention, does not raise flags, does not ask for recognition. Still, it is capable of altering entire destinies. This force is the invisible influence. In nature, everything that truly transforms acts like this. The wind does not explain its intention to the leaves. It just passes. The moon doesn't convince the tides to rise. She just stays where she is. And the morning dew does not negotiate with the flower. It rests on it, silent, until something awakens. When we look carefully, we notice life changes things by proximity, not by imposition. Among human beings, this principle remains alive. People rarely change because they were pressured. They change because they felt something different when being around someone. A calm they didn't know, a clarity they couldn't name, a silence that didn't judge. This is the art of transforming without touching directly. When someone tries to change another with harsh words, what happens first is not listening. It's defense. The mind closes, the heart withdraws, and everything that could flourish protects itself. But when someone doesn't try to change, something unexpected happens. The space opens up, and in this space, the other begins to hear themselves. The invisible influence arises from the inner state, not from what you say but what you emanate. No correction, but the coherence between what you experience and what you feel. That's why certain people transform entire environments without ever making speeches. They enter a place and the pace slows down. Conversations become more genuine. Tensions lose strength. Nothing was done, and everything changed. This type of presence does not try to teach. She allows the other person to discover. It doesn't point out paths. It creates enough silence for everyone to find their own. There is something deeply respectful about this. It is recognizing that each person has their own time, your cycle, your own winter, and your own spring. Forcing a flower to open prematurely is to tear it from the stem. The invisible influence trusts the process. She knows that true transformation does not happen at the moment of impact, but then, when no one is looking. Perhaps this is one of the greatest reversals of perspective in modern life. We believe that only those who confront it change. But nature shows us something else. Whoever remains aligned changes everything around. By choosing not to force, you don't become passive. You become precise. Your energy stops being lost in disputes and starts to act where it really matters, in the subtle field, where decisions are born before becoming words. And the more you understand this, but realize that transforming someone, it is not a direct act. It's a side effect of being in harmony with that which cannot be seen. There is a silent principle that governs all lasting transformations. That which is clean on the inside, you don't need to convince anyone on the outside. When the inside is in order, the outside naturally reorganizes itself. The presence of someone aligned acts as clear water in a cloudy container. Without effort, without explanation, the dirt begins to settle down. Nothing is pushed. Nothing is ripped away. There is only room for what was confused find rest. Many people believe that changing others requires direct action, advice, corrections, alerts, confrontations. But this impulse is usually born more from anxiety than from wisdom. There is a rush to see results, a discomfort with the natural timing of things. However, life does not respond well to emotional urgency. The more someone tries to impose change but arouses resistance, pure presence works in a way opposite. It doesn't invade, it invites. Purity here does not mean moral perfection or spiritual superiority. It means coherence. It's when thoughts, emotions, and actions move in the same direction. When there is no internal conflict, the surrounding field becomes stable. People understand this intuitively. They don't know how to explain it, but they feel safe. And where there is security, defense falls. Where the defense falls, the listening begins. This is one of the most underrated forces in existence. A calm inner state communicates more than any well-crafted speech. A non-judgmental look dismantles tensions that words could never dissolve. A complete silence reveals more truth than long explanations. Little by little, those who live with this presence begin to observe. Not because he was instructed, but because something inside was touched. It is important to understand that this influence is not immediate. It acts in invisible time. Often change happens when you have already left the room, when the conversation ended, when the day passed. It is during this interval that the effect is complete. The humanity needs space to reorganize its own conclusions. When this space is respected, transformation happens from the inside out, which is the only way that really stays. A clean presence also teaches something essential. There is no need to carry the weight of responsibility for the other. Each person has their own path, their own choices and learning. By trying to save, correct, or speed up someone else's process, we create an imbalance that wears on both sides. When you take care of your inner state, offers something much more valuable, an environment where others can grow without fear. This stance requires spiritual maturity. It demands trust in the invisible. It requires accepting that not every change will be visible, not every impact will be recognized. But nature does not work to be applauded. She works to maintain harmony. When you choose in this way, its influence becomes constant, silent, and profound. And without realizing it, people begin to change not because you ask them to, but because something inside them found a new point of balance when being close to you. In the next step of this journey, we will see how this inner state translates into attitudes, simple things that, without the intention of teaching, end up transforming everything around them. There is a way of teaching that does not use words, and yet leaves deep marks. It is the silent example. He doesn't announce himself, he doesn't impose himself, and he doesn't seek validation. It simply exists. And by existing in a coherent way, it begins to reorganize everything around. People observe more than they admit. Even when they seem distracted, they record gestures, attitudes, choices, and the way someone reacts to the world. This registration happens below the surface, where defenses cannot reach. When someone acts in harmony with what they feel, without visible internal contradictions, they create a natural contrast with environments based on tension, rush, and conflict. This contrast does not accuse, but reveals. It does not point out errors, but highlights possibilities. It is at this point that the transformation begins. not by direct confrontation but by the silent comparison that each person does within themselves when they realize that there is another way of being in the world. The silent example does not attempt to correct behaviors. It offers a lively reference. When you see someone act calmly where there was irritation before, remain firm without aggressiveness, choosing silence where there would previously have been a dispute, the observer begins to question your own impulses. This question does not arise as criticism, but as curiosity. And curiosity is always an open door, never a wall. Many believe that, to transform someone, you need to say exactly what is wrong. But in practice, this almost always produces the opposite effect. The other closes, justify itself, or distance itself. The silent example does not generate defense because it does not carry accusation. He doesn't say, "You should be like this." He just shows that it is possible to be different. And this difference, when it is authentic, becomes impossible to ignore. There is also an aspect of humility to this type of influence. Who lives by example does not place himself above anyone, does not present itself as a guide, savior, or reference morals. Just mind your own way. This posture removes any feeling of hierarchy and creates more fertile ground for real change. People feel free to reflect without fear of judgment. This type of presence requires constancy. This is not an isolated gesture, but a continuous way of living. Small daily choices repeated consistently build a silent force over time. It's like the work of water on stone, imperceptible at the beginning, inevitable at the end. Anyone watching nearby begins to feel the effects even without understanding where they come from. If this idea begins to resonate with you, perhaps it is because something inside has already realized that it is not necessary to carry the burden of changing anyone. There is relief in that. When abandoning the attempt to control others, you regain energy to take care of what really matters, your inner state. And this care, paradoxically, is what most influences those around us. Transforming without forcing is trusting that example is more powerful than speech. It is accept that each person will awaken in their own time. And it is understanding that, sometimes the biggest impact happens when no one realizes you were trying, make some impact. In the next block, we will see how time, patience, and non-resistance complete this process, allowing the change to mature without being interrupted. There is a silent anxiety that pervades human relationships, the need to make the other change now. This rush is almost never about the other, but about the internal discomfort of those who observe. When something bothers us, we want to resolve it quickly, adjust, align, correct. However, life does not respond well to this type of urgency. Everything that grows healthily follows cycles, and ignoring these cycles is stop the process before it matures. True harmony comes from respect for time, not clock time, but time inside of things. Each person goes through their own stages of understanding, resistance, denial, and acceptance. Forcing someone to skip steps does not accelerate growth. It just creates internal cracks that later take their toll. Just like a fruit harvested too soon never develops its full flavor, an imposed change never creates deep roots. Non-resistance is one of the most difficult principles to understand, because it is often confused with passivity or indifference. But not resisting doesn't mean agree with everything, nor abandon limits. It means to stop fighting against what is not yet, may be different. It means acting where there is openness and remaining silent where there is closure. This sensitivity avoids unnecessary wear and tear and preserves the vital energy of the relationship. When you stop pushing, something curious happens. The other person starts to move. A resistance decreases because there is no longer any opposing force. Many people are stuck in old behaviors not out of conviction, but out of defense. When they feel like they don't need to protect themselves, rigidity loses meaning. The space created by non-resistance allows that reflection arises without external pressure. Time also has a pedagogical function. He reveals, slowly, the consequences natural choices. When someone is constantly saved from their own learning, misses the opportunity to grow. Respecting other people's time means trusting that own experience will be a more effective teacher than any external intervention. This confidence requires emotional maturity and detachment from control. Harmony is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to go through it without breaking the conflict. Internal balance. When you stay centered, even in the face of behaviors that have not yet changed, sends a silent message. It is possible to remain whole without dominating anyone. This stance is profoundly transformative because it shows that the peace does not depend on the immediate correction of the world around. There is a type of strength that only reveals itself over time. She doesn't impress at first, no generates immediate impact, but builds something solid and lasting. This strength comes from patience, constancy, and refusal to use pressure as a tool. By choosing not resist, you align yourself with the natural flow of things and allow change to find its own path. Transforming without forcing is accepting that not everything is ready to flourish now. It's taking care of land, offer presence, and wait. In the next step, we will bring these principles together to understand in a way clear and integrated the 8 ways in which this transformation silently manifests itself in everyday life, almost without being noticed. After understanding the value of presence, example, time, and non-resistance, it becomes possible to realize that transforming without forcing is not an isolated act, but a set of internal postures that manifest themselves naturally in everyday life. These shapes do not function as techniques applied to others, but as states cultivated in oneself, same. When integrated, they create a field where change happens without being pushed. The first way is to take care of your own inner state before taking any action. People they feel more than they hear. If there is agitation, judgment, or need for control by inside, this communicates even in silence. By stabilizing the interior, you stop the voltage chain before it propagates. The second way is to offer presence without a hidden agenda. Being with someone without secret intention to change it creates trust. When the other realizes that there is no manipulation or expectation, relax. And in this relaxation, reflection begins to emerge spontaneously. The third way is to act with coherence between discourse and practice. Nothing generates more resistance than words that are not supported by attitudes. When someone lives what it expresses, without needing to reinforce, the impact is silent and profound. The inconsistency generates discredit. Coherence generates natural influence. The fourth way is to respect the other person's internal time. Each person matures perceptions at different paces. Trying to speed up this process breaks something delicate. When you respect other people's time, you demonstrate confidence in the other person's ability to understand for yourself what strengthens rather than weakens. The fifth way is to not react immediately. Between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. Expanding this space changes everything. When you don't react on impulse, you create a silence that disarms conflicts and invites the other to also come out of automaticity. Many transformations begin in this invisible interval. The sixth way is to maintain boundaries without aggression. Not forcing does not mean allowing everything. Clear limits, placed calmly, teach more than emotional confrontations. They show that it is possible to be firm without hurting. And this combination usually generates respect, genuine. The seventh way is to accept that not everyone will change. This acceptance sets you free. When you release the need for results, your presence becomes lighter and truer. Paradoxically, it is at this point that change becomes more likely, because it is not more being required. The eighth way is to trust the invisible. Not every influence will be visible. Not every impact will be recognized. Many seeds germinate far from the eyes of those who planted them. Trust in this process is letting go of the desire for control and allowing life to complete the work. These 8 ways don't require extra effort. On the contrary, they reduce wear, conflicts, and frustrations. Transforming without forcing is a way to save energy and depth of effect. It's not about doing more, but about interfering less. Not from convince, but to support. When these postures are integrated, something changes in the way you relate to the world. Interactions become more fluid. People feel less pressured and freer. And in this space of freedom, change stops being a threat and becomes a possibility. In the next and final block, we will bring all of this together in a contemplative closure, looking for the silent impact that this way of living generates over time, and for the invitation end of continuing to walk with more harmony between the visible and the invisible. Along this path, something subtle begins to reveal itself. Transforming without forcing is not a strategy for dealing with others, but a way of being in the world. When you leave from pushing reality, starts walking with it. And this change of posture alters everything. Even when nothing seems to happen on the surface, there is a particular serenity and understanding that you don't need to convince nobody at all. Life does not require this constant effort. People learn at pace experiences, mature when they are ready, and awaken when something inside them you find enough space to breathe. When you offer this space, you are doing more than you imagine. This way of living returns something precious: lightness. Relationships are no longer fields of silent battle. Conversations no longer carry the tension of those who need to reach some specific place. You start to listen more, react less, and trust more. And this confidence is not naive. It is born from deep observation of nature, which is never it hurries and yet never fails to transform. The influence that really remains is not the one that imposes, but the one that accompanies. It's not that demands change, but that which sustains coherence. When you take care of own state interior, acts with integrity, and respects the timing of things, becomes like a point of balance in the midst of movement. People come closer, move away, change, resist, and you remain whole. Perhaps this is the greatest reversal of everything we were taught. It is not the force that shapes the world, but harmony. It is not control that transforms, but trust in the flow invisible that connects everything. When you let go of the need for immediate results, discovers that life works in much deeper ways than direct effort would never achieve. If this path has touched something in you, allow it to continue beyond this video. Not how an idea to apply, but as an attitude to live by. Notice how your relationships, they respond when you reduce pressure and increase presence. Notice how the environment, it changes when you change the way you are in it. If you want to continue walking with us through this silent territory, where the invisible guides visible, subscribe to the channel and stay close. Every step here is an invitation to harmony, not imposition. And take one last question with you, without rushing to answer it. And if what we call influence is not something we do, but something that naturally happens when we are at peace with the path we have taken cross?